Welcome to North American Ag Spotlight. I'm Chrissy Wozniak. I am honored to have a special guest on the show today to talk about an important issue that we've been covering diligently over the past few years, the Waters of the United States rule and its disastrous implications for the American producer. My guest represents North Carolina's 7th Congressional District, elected to the United States Congress in 2014. He's in his 5th term in the U.S. House of Representatives. He serves on the House Agriculture Committee and the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, where he's currently serving as chairman of the Subcommittee on Water Resources and Environment. He's been a fierce advocate for agriculture, and he's doing his best to fight this WOTUS ruling. I'd like to welcome Congressman David Rouzer. Welcome, and thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, it's great to be with you.
So first of all, tell me a bit about your background and what brought you here to the House of Representatives.
Well, I grew up in North Carolina. My father's side of the family is from Salisbury, just outside of Charlotte. A lot of people in your audience will know Charlotte, or at least heard of it. And then my mom's side of the family is from the eastern part of North Carolina, just a little southeast of Raleigh. There in Johnston County, we have a farm. My uncle still farms tobacco, sweet potatoes, soybeans, peanuts. And so I grew up working on the farm during the summers, and I always loved agriculture. Went to NC State, where I majored in agriculture business management, agricultural economics, and chemistry, of all things, a little trifecta there. And but really wasn't excited about any of the job opportunities that I had. I happened to be in a program over in Prague, the Czech Republic, my senior year that summer before I graduated in December of 1994. And my roommate was from Romania, had lived his whole life behind the Iron Curtain.
Wow.
Again, this was the summer of 94, so not that long after the fall of the wall. There were about 60 students in that program, 10 of us from America, 50 from the former communist bloc. And so to hear the firsthand account of what it was like to live under tyranny behind the Iron Curtain, where in essence, your media was dictated and controlled completely. You didn't have the opportunity to go to the United States or anywhere else for that matter. And it struck me that they knew more about America and its history and its purpose and its founding than we did. And the bottom line was, it occurred to me, if you don't have your politics right, nothing else works very well either. And so when I graduated that December, it just happened to be the House went Republican for the first time in 40 years, that fall of 1994. The Senate flipped into Republican hands as well. So I came up to DC, started knocking on doors, and I landed a job with U.S. Senator Jesse Helms, who was a senior member on the Senate Agriculture Committee, was a longtime member of the U.S. Senate from North Carolina. He was chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee at the time I worked for him, and I basically handled the agriculture portfolio and trade portfolio for him. And so got a lot of great experience dealing with a lot of high-level officials, and many ambassadors and prime ministers, would come by and see Helms, and we'd always talk about the importance of North Carolina agriculture and the importance of exports, whether it be furniture, textiles, or tobacco, or sweet potatoes, soybeans, whatever it might be. And so that's how I got my career started in the political realm. Later on, worked for NC State University for a while, my alma mater, and then served in the state legislature for 2 terms, where I was one of the lead co-chairs on the Senate Ag Committee, and also led the effort for regulatory reform in North Carolina when I was in the state Senate, and then eventually landed here in Congress. I've been on the House Agriculture Committee and Transportation and Infrastructure Committee since day one. Both of those committees fit the unique needs of my district very, very well. I have a lot of Army Corps of Engineer issues, and of course, a lot of agriculture in my district too. And all aspects of the Clean Water Act, WOTUS, you name it, has a big impact on all of us in rural America, and my district in particular. So I've enjoyed my service, on those 2 committees, and trying to do what we can to improve the livelihood and opportunities for all those in rural America.
Wow, that's quite the resume, and thank you for all of your service these years.
Well, thank you. I forgot this, I was over at USDA Rural Development as well.
Oh, wow.
during the Bush administration, George W. Bush's administration, and did a lot of work there at that particular agency, Rural Development. I was one of the associate administrators of the Rural Business Cooperative Programs, which the flagship of that and still is the Business and Industry Loan Guarantee Program. So I've been a part of a lot of major investments all around the country in rural America.
Wow. And so I guess you've been with this from day one then. So can you give us a brief background on the waters of the United States rule, all the way from back in the Obama administration through the Trump administration to today?
Sure. Well, obviously, the Clean Water Act, when it was written in the early 70s, I think 1974, as I recall, many times Congress leaves out critical definitions, or is it quite as explicit maybe Congress should be? And so as part of the Clean Water Act, there's reference to water of the United States, but there's no specific definition of what a water of the United States is. And as a result, as you can imagine, and just looking at the nature of the term, it's a very subjective term. Depending upon who's looking at it, you have different thoughts about what a water of the U.S. Should be. And so you've had all this litigation, all this creativity that has really muddied the water, no pun intended there, but it's probably as good a way to put it as anything. And so you've had all this litigation over the years, and different administrations have tried to bring some clarity. The Obama administration brought clarity, but they went way overboard in terms of the definition, where basically any pool of water in a ditch or even in a yard, if you have the right bureaucrats show up, that could be classified as a water of the U.S. and therefore subject you to fines, penalties, et cetera, for violating the Clean Water Act, when you had no idea that you were doing any such thing, when all you were trying to do was put a shed in your backyard, for example. So that the courts essentially stopped the Obama rule. And then later on, Trump, when he got elected, his team looked at it, and they officially repealed the Obama rule and put in place a much more common sense rule. But of course, the environmental groups didn't like that, so there were legal challenges to it as well. And so you've had this hodgepodge over the years of different standards about what a water of the U.S. should be. Of course, the Biden administration comes in, and just like they've done with every rule that was put in place by President Trump's administration, they reverse it and put in place their own rule. And then you had a number of states who have said no. This is quite problematic for us. And judge basically rules in favor of those who brought the complaint. The other half of the country didn't bring the complaint, and so here we are again, where one half of the country is under an older standard, the other half of the country is under the new Biden standard, which I might add is really the original Obama rule. It's just cloaked a little differently, but in effect, it creates a hazy situation, out there, where you're going to have some bureaucrats in some part of the country rule that certain things are wetlands based on their subjective definition of the water of the U.S. And in other places, that's not going to happen, where, the new rules is not in effect at all. So in Congress, we tried to bring some clarity by going back to the original Trump rule. We passed a CRA that basically said that, or reversed, this new Biden rule. Got a good, strong bipartisan vote in the House. Not a significant number of Democrats, but a good handful of them. And the same in the Senate. And so it went to the president's desk. And of course, as I think everybody knows, he chose to veto the bill. We obviously didn't have the votes to override a veto in the House. And so, that effort died there. But from a litigation standpoint, I have to think it's going to be pretty helpful. And I'm not an attorney, but I have to think it's going to be pretty helpful to have on record a bipartisan opposition from both the House and the Senate on this particular rule. as litigation continues in the courts. Democrat mayors, Republican mayors, stakeholders of all types are very concerned about implementation of this rule. And so I think the bottom line is this is going to be a continual battle. The waters are going to remain muddy in this respect. But eventually, I hope that we can come to some clarity. Obviously, there's a case before the U.S. Supreme Court, which might bring some much needed clarity here, Sackett versus EPA. And so if the court rules the way many hope that they will, it'll bring a great deal of clarity. Although I wouldn't be a bit surprised if the ruling isn't a little more parsed and perhaps muddies the water a little more. So we'll just have to see what happens there. But this is going to be a continual fight, and I think you'll see us look at opportunities as part of the appropriations process, where we can include policy riders. One such being, no funding can be used to implement this new WOTUS rule in the states, where it's still applicable. So little measures like that, I think you'll see us take a good, strong look at and probably pursue as well as this moves forward.
Yeah, those are some great steps. And in the veto, President Biden stated the increased uncertainty caused by Resolution 27 would threaten economic growth, including agriculture, local economies, downstream communities. Farmers would be left wondering whether artificially irrigated areas remain excluded or not. So how is he coming to that conclusion there? And do you have any insight into his thought process? Because it just seems completely opposite of what is reality.
Well, he's right on the point that we do need to have some certainty and transparency here. But all the exclusions that he refers to there, and there are a list of exclusions that this administration put in place as part of this rule. But as I mentioned on the floor one day during debate, the other side was talking about the exclusion for farmers, XYZ. And my point is you're excluded until you're not excluded. You're excluded until that particular bureaucrat shows up and decides that, in his view, you've gone way beyond the definition of a water of the U.S. and therefore you lose your exclusion. What the government granteth, the government can taketh away, and all dependent upon the viewpoint of a bureaucrat. And so, and that's part of what I was referring to earlier when I mentioned that this was cloaked just a little, it was cloaked a lot differently than the original Biden plan, the original Obama plan. But it's in essence pretty much the same. They try to make it different with all these exclusions, but again, one day you're excluded, the next day you're not. That's the problem with this.
Right. Yeah. And so back to the judge's decision on April 12th, Judge Daniel Hovland, he blocked Biden's clean water rule in 24 states. And his ruling said that the court is skeptical that the Environmental Protection Agency has the authority to regulate waters as expansively as the rule permits it to. So what does it mean for those states, those 24?
Well, for those 24, they're the 24 that filed suit in opposition to the rule, asking for the courts to invalidate it. And so obviously that's a good first step for them. The problem is the rest of the country has to live with the rule as it currently is. And but I do think the Sackett versus EPA ruling will bring some clarity. Although as I mentioned before, it may not be quite the clarity that everybody is hoping for. I think it might be a little more nuanced. So we'll just have to see. This is going to be a continual battle. We'll continue to try to address it from the halls of Congress as best we can. But we're in a divided government. The Democrat Party has the majority in the Senate. The Republican Party has the majority in the House. The Democrat Party has the White House. And until we get some more like minds, here on Capitol Hill and in the White House, it's going to be hard to get the kind of common sense clarity that we had with the Trump rule. But we're going to continue to fight for it.
That's great. And what can people do to help? What's the constructive way that we can all help in this issue?
Well, not to be over political about it, but elections have consequences.
Yeah.
And, it may sound, WOTUS or Waters of the U.S. may sound like it doesn't have anything related to you, but it could derail neighborhoods, homeowners. You could find where you put up a fence around your house. A bureaucrat comes out one day and says that you violated the Clean Water Act, and all of a sudden you're facing hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of fines. You're being prosecuted by the Army Corps of Engineers. Just things that you think are totally and completely insane and can never happen in the United States. Well, it can happen. And in fact, it already has happened in a number of cases. Our own John Duarte, who's a new Republican member from the House of Representatives, or from California here in the House of Representatives. He was prosecuted, fined, et cetera, where he took a piece of property that he had acquired, historically had wheat on it, if I recall correctly, and had prepared it to plant as wheat. And lo and behold, the Army Corps and the EPA come out and say that he's violated the Clean Water Act, that's really technically a wetland. Yet there's no water anywhere on it. They're coming out there doing all these soil samples and all this stuff. And it's really just amazing the amount of headache and financial stress that these government agencies and bureaucrats can put people under for really no good reason at all. And quite honestly, it's very tyrannical, if you ask me, and certainly if you ask John Duarte or anybody else who's been prosecuted.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. And you've been working on also, on so many other issues. This isn't just the only ag related issue you've been working on. You're on, as we said before, the House Ag Committee working on this year's Farm Bill. So what's the current trajectory and what are you hopeful about?
Well, the Farm Bill obviously comes up for renewal every 5 years. And this year, September 30th of this year, the current Farm Bill will expire. And so the House Ag Committee has been very busy traveling around the country, participating in a number of listening sessions, holding a number of listening sessions around the country. I've been to one in Texas and California, had a really nice ag roundtable in North Carolina, where we talked about the needs that farmers have. And generally speaking, all around the country, the needs are pretty much the same. One is labor. They got to have labor. Now, that's not a category that fits within the jurisdiction of the House Agriculture Committee, but it's obviously critically important for farmers because they've got to have labor to get crops planted and get harvest out of the field. And then in addition to that, strengthening the crop insurance safety net has been a key focus in all these Farm Bill listening sessions. Obviously, the input costs have gone up significantly. The price of diesel fuel, seed, fertilizer, ag chemicals. Speaking of the EPA, as we have been, the EPA is looking at sidelining a number of key chemicals that are used for food production. Sometimes I think we forget that our farmers are not competing with each other. They're competing with China and Brazil. They're competing with those countries that manipulate their currencies, undercutting our ability to sell, product internationally. These are countries that they don't have an Endangered Species Act. They could care less about an Endangered Species Act. If they want to build a canal, they just go build a canal. If they want to grow twice as much cotton than they did the year before, they just go do it. There's no effort towards conservation or good environmental practices or anything else. It's a very cutthroat business. And so I really think the entirety of the federal government and state governments as well need to understand what our farmers are competing against day in and day out. And so it's really important, therefore, to have a good, strong farm bill that meets the needs of our growers, when they need it the most. You could farm over a 10-year period and maybe only have 2 really good years. The other 8, were either a disaster or maybe, you broke even. And so it really is a very risky enterprise not just from the standpoint of all the competitors around the world and all their bad practices that put ours at a disadvantage, but also from the standpoint of weather. And, people forget too that farmers are price takers, they're not price makers. And so whatever that price of that commodity is what they receive. It's not what they it's not like they can pass on all the extra cost as many other businesses do to the consumer. So it's agriculture is a unique beast. When you lose a farm, in my neck of the woods in particular, it's either going up into solar or it's going more likely to development. And just because we have so many new people moving into the area.
Yeah, those are excellent points. And can you tell me a bit about the work that you're doing on the resolution to repeal the Department of Labor's H-2A adverse effects wage rate rule? That's a mouthful, but
Yeah, well, just like with the WOTUS rule, we introduced a CRA, which is a Congressional Review Act for both the WOTUS rule and, of course, this new labor H-2A rule. And the CRA is a unique legislative vehicle. It allows Congress to repeal a recent rule or regulation that's been put out by an administration. And the CRA only requires 51 votes in the Senate, so you don't have to get the usual 60-vote threshold to bypass a filibuster. These are non-filibusterable vehicles. And so with the new H-2A rule, the House has basically put forward a CRA, Congressional Review Act, that repeals this new rule from the administration. And I'm anticipating we'll have a successful vote in the House. We'll see what happens in the Senate, but this is one that as well may get a little bipartisan support. It won't get as much bipartisan support probably as the WOTUS CRA did, but I'm hopeful that it will, and we can at least hopefully make the administration rethink their position on this.
Great. And so one last question for you. Why do you serve the industry and fight for it? And what did God put you on this earth to accomplish?
Well, I ponder the latter question all the time.
Yeah.
I suspect that most of us do. But I got involved in politics because I recognize that what we have in this country is very precious, but it's also very fragile. And if you think about it, some of the core strengths of America are our natural resources that we've been blessed with, whether that's raw earth materials, minerals, oil and gas, natural gas in particular. I mean, we have a ton of natural gas we're sitting on, in this country that now, thanks to new technological innovations such as fracking, we can get to places we've never been able to get to in terms of extracting that natural gas. And it's very efficient, low cost, and a lot less carbon footprint, with natural gas as well. And agriculture, we really are one of the key bread baskets of the world. You travel out to California and see what a bread basket that is. In my part of the country, Southeastern North Carolina and the Southeast of the United States, a lot of specialty crops, a lot of animal production, protein production. I have a lot of hogs, turkeys, and chickens in my district, beef cattle. You go out to Montana and you see the cattlemen out there, and in the western part of the country. And so we really have such a diverse mix of agriculture and product that we produce in this country, which is not only critical to feeding ourselves, but helping to feed the world. And I've always said, if you can provide your own energy and export it to the world, if you can provide your own food and the world as well, you have the underpinnings, the basic principles in place to be very, very strong at home and very influential and strong abroad. And so it's a part of not only our domestic prosperity, economic prosperity, but it's a key part of our national security and our leverage on the foreign stage.
Awesome. Yeah, very well said. And if people want to learn more about what you're doing, where can people find you?
Well, they can go to the website, rouzer.house.gov, and we have a Facebook page as well, and Twitter, and then, of course, Instagram too. And of course, it's always easy. You could Google any one of us in Congress and probably find all kinds of information, hopefully most of which is true.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you just Google David Rouzer, Rouzer, you'll find more than you want to know. But the House website, my official website, is rouzer.house.gov.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me today.
Absolutely. And I might add too, we have a newsletter that you can sign up for on that website, rouzer.house.gov. And a lot of people do. It's got a significant number of subscribers and about a 44% or so open rate, which is pretty phenomenal for an email.
Sure is. Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks all who are watching or listening as well. If you want to learn more, all the links are provided in the show notes. And I would love it if you subscribe and share North American Ag Spotlight, YouTube, Rumble, or Telegram channels. And the podcast is available on Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, Amazon, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And have a great day.